Hello guys, I hope you've been watching my series on this Newman motor. It's a pretty exciting proposition, at least for myself. What I've been doing over the period is continuously downgrading the design, which has been really exciting because the entire premise of this motor is to put as much wire on it as possible. Doing so will yield as much free energy as possible, and eventually you might even be able to power your house. So I'm going to spin it up and explain the premise of what I've done here. Let's give it some voltage. Start off with 100 volts and off she goes. Now, believe it or not, this is much faster than it used to be at 100 volts. What I've done by removing 3/4 of the wire is actually make it spin 4 times faster. There's a downside to that. All that extra speed has translated to losing torque. So I have a lot less torque. The more wire these motors have, and the bigger magnets, and the bigger they are, the better they are. So basically, the more you spend on money and wasted space, the more free energy you'll get. So that's why I'm moving on to better designs and better things. But first we've got to film this. So let's juice it up to 200 volts. Now this time, when I went so far as to remove all that wire, taking the apparatus apart and put it back together again, the coil had to come off, and there's the bearing mounts, and there's a few support pillars to house the rotating shaft. Basically, every time it comes off and goes back together again, it does so worse. So I've now got a reasonable rattle in my desk, and the bearing mount on this side is also wobbling a bit. It's not too bad, but it's consuming quite a lot of power. Now, if we have a look at the power, it is using about 4 milliamps, maybe 3 milliamps at 200 volts. So we're well under 1 watt at the moment. However, because I've taken all that wire off, what I've managed to prove is that by loading the motor down, I get less power. It's really quite easy to load down. Previously, I've been able to squeeze it, at least squeeze the small part of the shaft, the 10mm part, not the 20mm part. The 10mm part I've been able to squeeze as hard as humanly possible and not been able to stop it, and made very little damage to the input power. But now I can squeeze and slow it down fairly easily, and the power consumption goes up by 5 times. So in order to produce power, it consumes power. You can avoid that by adding a huge amount of wire to the coil, which of course makes it very expensive to build. But over a long period of time, 5 years or so, that will pay off the wire, and then you will have a free energy machine that works forever, producing free electricity. Which sounds pretty good, but I think there's things that do that even more effectively. Although I'm still going to go ahead and build the next version of my Newman motor. Here are the new coils. I shall have 2 of these, one underneath, one on top, and the shaft going between. This is a very convenient geometry to play with. So, what I really wanted to show you, the important bit I wanted to record, is just how badly this motor responds when you load it down, which is what I just did. However, what I'm going to do is the same again, up to 300 volts. And I should explain, this is way, way faster than this thing used to run, due to that excess wire. and it's still very efficient. It's currently running 550 RPM, and I might turn it up a little more, but I'm a little concerned if I go any higher than that, because my whole desk has a very vivid resonant oscillation being transferred through it. But what I do have here is a coil, and what I'd like to do is show you what happens on my scope when I connect it. So that's our signal under load, 2 volts per division. Yeah, so that is currently almost 12 volts. In fact, I'll let my oscilloscope tell you what that is. That is an RMS of 3.7 volts and a peak of 10.5. So on this particular video, I won't be powering large light globes such as this one, as I've done in the past. This 40-watt globe, or actually I think it's a 28, but it's a very large incandescent, and it was quite powerfully operated before by the coupled generator, but without all that extra wire on the shaft, it's just not able to do that. So anyway, before this video goes on too long, I'm going to turn up the power ever so slightly, further than I have done before in its current configuration. But as soon as I finish recording this, what I'm going to do is tear it all down and continue with the build of the next one. So anyway, we've got 380 volts going in there now, and a power consumption of about 4.5 milliamps at 380 volts. So if I load it down with my hand now, that will jump up to almost, I've got to squeeze quite hard to do that, 20 milliamps, but obviously the motor's slowed down quite a bit. So I think I've got it down to something in the realms of, I really wouldn't know, hard to speculate, 100% efficient, probably a little more. But yeah, it's pretty terrible compared to where it was before. It's my goal for this last video was to basically make it into a conventional motor, and that's very nearly been done. See if I can hold the camera straight and see that the motor is in fact bouncing around all over the shop. Now, these transistors should be able to take a higher voltage, so I'm going to give them that and see how it handles it. So 400, 420, 420 volts. Okay, I am quite scared. Everything is about to explode, but for the last video on this build, that's probably not a bad thing. So we're up to 6 volts RMS, good bit of glow. Power consumption is about 13 milliamps at 420 odd volts. I'll do the math on that. Oh, you hear that? It's chugging like an old Datsun, and I know exactly why that is. I'll turn it right down. It sounds much like what I was concerned would happen. The coupling between the shaft and the magnets has loosened off a bit and thrown the timing out. That's quite easily done. Just the vibration is enough to do that because it's so unbalanced. But anyway, it's all doom and gloom despite the abundance of excitement. So a lot of fun. And yeah, join me for the next motor. Or join me 3 months in the past when I showed you this thing running at several 100% efficient and arguably close to 1,000. Much like my other linear motor. So, very cool. Forgive the scientific nature of the videos, but this is the fact of the matter. You must tackle a lot of science and a lot of technicians' tedium in order to get real results. And at the moment, this motor has been able to produce that for me. we've been able to show more energy out than in. So, pretty pleased with that. Have a good day. See you back for the next one. Okay, a few minutes later, and half a beer, and I've realised I can make this last video a little better. What I plan to do is turn it on again, which is what it's actually been doing. It's got this slight oscillation going, and it won't quite finish a rotation, and that's with no input power from the power supply. That is purely from the power coming from the input transformers through the base of the transistor, which is in the interests of accuracy, not actually being metered. So when I say before the input power was 0.6 of a watt, it was probably more like 3 watts. Now of course 0.6 of a watt is what's coming from the main power supply, which is what really matters, because if the motor was ever put into production, that's what it would actually be using. All this extra power that I'm burning up is simply from the inefficiency of running it in my backyard in a careless sort of fashion. So anyway, I'm going to stick with the real numbers, which is what it's actually drawing from my wall power supply. Okay, just in the interests of convenience. So we're going to kick it off and juice up the power. Okay, so there we are, back up to 200 volts. Now what I wanted to do, before I end this little demo, is stick a piece of iron down through the transformer, thereby putting a much greater load on it. So I'll connect this up. It's a little tricky with one hand. So what we have here is it's down to 2.2 volts RMS. So let's go right back up to where we were before, about 380 or so, which is about where it started giving me difficulties previously. That's nicely centered. Okay, so what we might do is just try actually 420, because that's where we're at. So RMS 4.33. It seems to vary a bit. I'm not entirely sure I understand the poor performance here. I can feel the magnetic field all the way out here. And that gives us an extra 30% on the output. And the RPM is going down very little. I suspect this coil is not particularly efficient. Well, there we go, friends. I tried. I almost let go of that, causing a catastrophic explosion. I must admit, that's kind of what I was hoping for. But I managed to hold on to it despite the beer. So, there we have it. Come back for the next one. I promise it will be better yet. Thanks very much.